Awesome. Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so excited to have you here. Welcome to the Let's Get Social Week event called Reset Your Sleep. My name is Olivia, and I'll be hosting this session today. Before we begin, I'm just going to go over a couple of housekeeping items. So please feel free to use the chat throughout this session to engage with your community. So I see a few of you have already said hello and good afternoon. It's so nice to hear from you. And please feel free to connect and chat throughout this session. If you're someone who would like to use the closed captioning feature, you can absolutely do that by selecting the CC icon along the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. Again, please feel free to ask questions throughout the session using the Q&A tab. We are going to hold questions until the end of the session, so the last 15-20 minutes or so. So we will kind of address those in order. And during that Q&A session, you can also raise your virtual hand and we can request to unmute you if you prefer to ask your question verbally. This event is being recorded and it will be available to watch on the AC Hub website in the coming days. And a quick note, if you're someone who's planning on coming to campus this fall semester, make sure to give yourself enough time to go through the COVID-19 screening process. And you can check out the Algonquin College vaccination policy and FAQ document before heading over to campus. And so we'll post those links in the chat now, just for anyone who would like to take a look at them. Okay, folks, now that those housekeeping items are out of the way, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Jessica White. Jessica White is a sleep educator, a certified teacher, and the owner of Jessica White Sleep Solutions. Jessica has a certificate in maternal mental health and has advanced training in cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. As an entrepreneur and mother of three, Jessica understands how exhausting and hopeless sleep disruptions can be, and therefore is passionate about helping her clients engage with their natural ability to sleep and to wake up feeling like themselves. So that was quite the introduction, and I'm so excited for you folks to meet Jessica. So without further ado, Jessica, we're going to toss it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Olivia. I'm really happy to be here. And it's such a great time of year to focus on creating new habits. And for a lot of people, sleep is something that gets lost in the shuffle, especially as students. It sort of gets low priority on the list of things to do. And today I really want to talk about why sleep is actually your superpower to improve your learning, to improve your productivity, and most of all in these times, to improve your resilience when faced with stress. So I'm going to do that today by sharing how sleep works, the process of sleep, why it's important, and then teach you some strategies so that you can reset your sleep, learn how to prioritize it, learn ways that you can optimize it so that you can really use it as a superpower for living your best life. So thank you for coming today. And as Olivia said, if you have any questions, just pop them in the chat, excuse me, and I will get to them at the end. So next slide, please. So sleep is really the foundation for everything. And I think it's really interesting when you look at media and health, there's a huge focus on exercise and nutrition, and sleep, it is getting more attention, but it's not sort of at the forefront of the key to good health. And I would like to change that story, because I think actually sleep is the foundation for everything. If you're sleep deprived or not well rested, it's really hard to make decisions about good nutrition or have the motivation to exercise. And actually, when we're sleep deprived, our bodies crave carbs and sugars. So how can we make good, healthy food choices if we're not sleeping well? So sleep is really the foundation for good health and for optimal well-being and for stress management. It's the reset button. When we're well slept, it resets our bodies and our minds. And it increases our immune function, which is especially important these days, more than ever. And as people start to be around each other again, our immune systems are sort of out of practice. So when we are well rested, our immune function is strengthened. Evidence shows that if you're sleeping less than 7 hours, your immune system is actually compromised. And there was even evidence that came out when the vaccines were first starting to roll out, that if you were unrested the night or 2 nights prior to getting the vaccine, that its efficacy was decreased. So if you're interested in that, you can look into that a little bit more. But it really is important for making sure that our bodies are working at their maximum ability and capacity. The other interesting thing about getting good sleep is that it actually boosts our mood. Studies from UBC the last couple of years have shown that when we are well rested, we actually can access feelings of joy more easily than when we're sleep deprived. And most importantly for students, I too am a student right now, it's really important for memory, to be able to consolidate memories and to be able to retrieve memories when needed. So sleep is absolutely important. Next slide. So the really interesting thing is that everyone actually has different sleep needs. The World Health Organization recommends that adults get between 7 and 9 hours, but there seems to be this real emphasis on the number 8. And I want to sort of take away that pressure today, because every single individual has their own particular sleep needs and sleep timing. And some of that is age related and some of that's genetics. You may find that you're a night owl, or you might find that you're an early bird. And that's absolutely okay and normal. But what you want to do is really tap into what your sleep needs are. So if you were to take away alarm clocks and track your sleep for 2 weeks or a week even, what would your average sleep needs look like? Are you an 8? Are you a 7.5? Are you a 9? What is it that you actually need? And once you determine that, how can you prioritize that? How can you slot that into your day and prioritize turning off the devices and giving yourself an opportunity to sleep for your total sleep needs? And that really is the number one thing once you start thinking about sleep, is figuring out what that is. The other thing is that it's not the number of hours necessarily, it's how you feel when you wake up. So if you feel well rested after getting 7 hours, then that's a good indicator that you're getting the sleep that you need. If you wake up feeling refreshed and ready to start the day, it doesn't mean that you get out of bed and hit the ground running, but if you wake up and you feel pretty fresh and focused, then that's a good indicator. So I just say that because I know that there's a lot of emphasis on the number 8, and that is not necessarily true. What is true is that anything less than 7 hours is considered to be not well rested or sleep deprived. And unfortunately, I think that would be the norm for a lot of people, especially for students, depending on what time your classes start, depending on your age. I know right now I have a teenage daughter, and our school system has just shifted its start times to 8 a.m. And we're really struggling because her natural biological rhythm states that she's supposed to be going to bed around 11 o'clock, 11:30, but that can't happen if she needs to be up at 6:37 to get to school. So if that speaks to you and your current situation, then it's trying to shift so that you get your total sleep needs in your schedule so that you can get it in, fit it in, prioritize it. The other thing on that is that everyone has an ideal sleep window. So that window I'm going to talk a bit more about later in this chat, but start to think about that. So not only the hours of sleep that you feel you need, but when is your ideal sleep window? And interestingly enough, that is age dependent. So when we're kids, our sleep window is really early, right? 7, 8 p.m. As we go into adolescence, then that becomes later and later and later. And that's a natural biological shift. 11, 12, that's perfectly normal for teenagers, early young adults. As we get older and start to move into sort of middle age, or 20, 30, 40s, 50s, that sort of shifts again. And it's more of a 10, 11 is sort of an ideal bedtime, 6, 7 a.m. wake up. As we get older still and move into the next phase of life, that shifts again to an earlier. So you may notice that grandparents or parents might have more of a 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m. bedtime, and that's perfectly normal as well. So figuring out what your ideal sleep gate or sleep window is also part of this, part of the puzzle. Next slide, please. So how does sleep work? What is the science behind this process? We run on a 24-hour cycle, and it's our sleep-wake cycle. And it is run or motivated by two distinct biological systems, our circadian clock or our circadian rhythm, and our sleep drive or sleep pressure. And these two functions work independently, but they coexist so that we feel alert during the day and sleepy when it's time to go to bed. And these are really important because if we don't understand how these work and how these help us feel alert in the day and sleepy at night, then we can often get in our own way and sort of work against these two functions. And that's where sleep issues can rear their ugly head. And I'm going to talk about that too. So the circadian rhythm or our circadian clock, that determines the best timing for sleep. So like I was just saying, your personal individualized sleep window or sleep gate, that is determined by your circadian rhythm. And that's a 24-hour cycle. So we were just talking about that. So a couple hours or an hour before you get up, the sun starts to rise. That's when this cycle starts, the 24-hour cycle. So that coincides with cortisol building, that makes us feel alert. And it increases during the day. There's a slight dip in the afternoon, which you may be experiencing right now. After lunch, we tend to have a little lull, and that's oftentimes when people feel like they want to have a nap or have a caffeinated beverage, but that's completely normal. So that's just our cortisol levels dipping. They start to increase again and sort of peak around 8 p.m. and then they start to decline. And that's when melatonin, our sleepy hormone, starts to be produced. So that timing of the melatonin release is actually determined by our circadian rhythms. And that is signaled by light. And I'm going to talk about the importance of light later on. So as I was saying, the circadian rhythm determines the best timing for sleep and timing for alertness. On the other side, we have our sleep drive or our sleep pressure. And the sleep pressure determines the quality of sleep that we get. And it determines the ease of falling asleep and staying asleep. So if you have good sleep pressure, then you will have not a lot of trouble falling asleep and you should stay asleep throughout the night. I like to use a metaphor of a balloon to describe sleep pressure, as I think it is I actually learned it from one of my teachers, Colleen Carney, and she showed how this balloon, if you think of it like when you wake up in the morning, that balloon is flat. But the second you wake up, a hormone in our brain starts being produced called adenosine, and that adenosine starts to build and essentially start to blow up that balloon. As the longer you're awake, the fuller that balloon gets. So that's your sleep pressure. And ideally, after 12 to 16 hours, that balloon is absolutely full. And that means that you're ready to go to sleep. So you should fall asleep easily. Your head hits the pillow and you're out within 10 minutes. And it should indicate that you have little sleep disruptions. Of course, it's normal to come up between sleep cycles for air, as I call it. I think that the number of times that adults wake is between 9 and 11. Don't quote me on that number, but we wake frequently in the night between sleep cycles or phases of sleep, but we just fall back to sleep when we don't even remember them. You may get up to go to the bathroom, but you'll go right back to sleep. So, but that sleep pressure, if your balloon is full, then that propensity to fall asleep is easy or should be easier. Next slide, please. So the other really cool thing about our sleep process is that we as adults have a 90-minute sleep cycle, and we usually cycle through this 5 times in the night. If you do the math, that adds up to about 7.5 hours of sleep. So obviously there's going to be a few disruptions, and you may not get those 8 hours, or you may not need those 8 hours, but that's how our sleep process works. So we cycle through approximately 5 times, approximately 90 minutes per each cycle. So the beginning of the beginning of the night, our brains are predominantly in NREM sleep. So this is slow wave sleep, and it is responsible for memory consolidation. And if you look at this diagram, you can see that at the beginning of the night, the time that we're in NREM sleep is quite long. So we spend the beginning of our night in that NREM sleep. We still have bits and pieces of the REM sleep, but it's shorter. However, as the night progresses, we spend more time in REM sleep and less time in NREM sleep. Now, to be a sleep architect, you really want to make sure that you are getting a full night's sleep so that your brain can access all types of sleep, because each type of sleep offers the brain different benefits. And it's really important because each of those things allow us to wake up feeling refreshed, help with memory consolidation, sorting, discarding, detoxifying. All of those cycles aid in those processes. So if you miss out on the beginning part of your sleep, so if you go to bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're missing out. And this is very common, especially when you're a student, stay up late to study for an exam, or you're writing a paper and you miss out on those first phases of sleep. You're missing out on that NREM sleep, which is responsible for memory consolidation, right? And that's what you actually need, especially if you're studying for an exam. On the flip side of it, if you wake up really early, perhaps your sleep is disrupted and you can't fall back asleep. I'll talk about reasons for that later. But you're missing out on REM sleep. And REM sleep is really important, especially for stress management and emotional regulation, because that is the sleep that processes emotions. So anything difficult that you've experienced or maybe experiencing, that's when your brain relives those experiences and takes the difficult emotion out of those experiences. So it clears out and forgets the painful parts of difficult experiences. And it also strengthens memory connection, or our ability to recollect memories. So you can see that both parts of those sleep are equally as important. So it's really important to make sure that you're getting all 5 cycles of sleep. Next slide, please. So I want to emphasize that sleep disruptions are normal. They happen all the time. So it can be because you drank too much tea before bed, or you're having a particularly trying time with one of your children, or you have a parent that's sick, or, I mean, gosh, all of us over the last year and a half, we've had a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress. So that will impact our sleep, and that is absolutely normal. However, it's how we deal with those sleep disruptions that can end up causing sleep issues. So that's where I want to focus the next part of this discussion, is how we get in our own way. So next slide, please. So if you are one that struggles with sleep issues, I want to sort of describe and explain how that happens. So again, like I said, normal to have sleep disruptions a couple nights, a couple nights a week, maybe once a month, maybe a couple times a year, you find that you have sleep disruptions. Some people are impacted by the full moon. They might not sleep for a couple nights around the full moon. That's normal, right? If we let our bodies just kind of do its thing and trust that our bodies will get back on track, most of the time you'll just, those sleep disruptions will be little blips in your memory. You won't even remember that they happen. However, if we start to implement coping strategies to deal with the overtiredness or those disruptions, that's when the sleep issues can start to persist. And in adults, the most common sleep issue is insomnia. And insomnia is defined as a sleep issue that is occurring for a prolonged period of time, usually over a month. And it's sort of a 24-hour issue because you experience issues at night when you're trying to sleep, but that impacts your daytime. So it becomes this 24-hour problem. And insomnia actually is very difficult to diagnose because it's so individual and it's based on our perceptions of how we're sleeping. And there really isn't anything that can, you can't just prescribe a pill for it. Doctors will prescribe sleep medications, but sleep medications in the long term are not very good for our health. So really, cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia is really one of the only things. And a lot of what I do is informed by that practice. And I'm going to give you a lot of those strategies today. So what are the coping strategies? Well, coffee. I love my coffee, but I've learned how to use my coffee appropriately so it doesn't impact my sleep. What else? We have napping. Alcohol is often used as a coping strategy. Trying to get more sleep, right? So exerting a lot of effort to get more sleep, going to bed earlier, sleeping in on the weekends, napping. If you find that you're putting a lot of effort into sleep, buying sleep masks and buying all these things to help you sleep, that's kind of a red flag that you're getting in your body's own way. And what do those coping mechanisms or strategies do? They impact those biological systems I was just talking about. So they will reduce your sleep drive or make that balloon squishy so that it's not completely full when you try and fall asleep, which will make it more difficult to fall asleep. Those coping strategies impact your timing, right? So suddenly you're, one night you're going to bed at 9, the next night at 11, the next night at 2, then you're back to 9. That's improper sleep timing. And that's really going to throw your circadian clock off. And it's ultimately like experiencing jet lag, right? And we all know what that feels like. It's disorienting, you feel groggy, you can feel sick. So it impacts your sleep timing. And then of course there's external factors that can cause insomnia. And that would be like a medical sleep disorder, or if you're taking medications for another health issue that impact sleep. And those would be things that you would want to get looked at and diagnosed by a medical practitioner. Next slide, please. So what can we do to get out of our way and to reset our body's natural ability to sleep? Next slide. The first thing that you will find if you Google sleep issues or can't sleep, and it's number one in sleep hygiene, is make your bedroom a sleep sanctuary. And I know it may sound obvious, but it's unbelievable what we, especially after this last year and a half, have started to use our bedrooms for. So first things first, clean up and tidy your bedroom, right? If you've got big piles of laundry and a desk full of scattered papers, it can cause unconscious stress and anxiety, which can impact your sleep. You want to limit the distractions in your room. You want it to be quiet. Sound machines are amazing. Fans, anything that you can put in to sort of neutralize outside noise, especially if you're in a dormitory. Dark, you want it to be dark, right? Because like I was saying earlier, our circadian rhythm is set by light. So if we want to send messages to our brain that we want to sleep, it needs to be dark. Temperature needs to be cool. And I know this may for some be really cold, but 19 to 21 degrees Celsius is the recommendation because our bodies need to drop in temperature in order for the sleep process to occur. So if you need to rearrange what type of bedding you're using, keep a window open, have a fan, you need to have a cool temperature for your body to access the sleep process. A lot of times that's why people use a bath or a shower as part of their wind down routine to sort of kickstart that drop in temperature. So that's a good thing to implement as well. The other thing is we want to make sure there's good air circulation. You don't want it to be too stuffy. So that's a fan and window again. Plants are really, really good for increasing air quality. You want to make sure it's clear of electronics and devices. Turn off the Wi-Fi, put your phone into airplane mode. You know, you don't want those lights from different devices that are going to distract you or make the room brighter in the middle of the night if you happen to come up for air from a sleep cycle and all of a sudden start fixating on a green light that's on your computer. So make sure that all those things are covered up so there's no distractions. And finally, pet-free zone. I know for a lot of families or individuals, if you have a pet that you sleep with, it can be hard to break that habit, but pets do cause sleep disruptions, cause us to wake up. And if you have difficulty falling back asleep, then you want to sort of remove those situations that are going to cause the sleep disruption to begin with. Next slide, please. So the other thing that's happened over the last year and a half regarding the bedroom is that a lot of us have started to use the bedroom, myself included, as an office, right? Or maybe that's the only place that you can retreat to because you live in a small circumstance and there's a lot of people under one roof. So the thing we want to be really, really careful about here is how we're using the bed. Our brains are very ritual or can be ritualized very easily, right? So if you start using the bed for wakeful activities, then your brain is going to start to associate the bed with being awake. And ultimately, the bed becomes like the bell in Pavlov's dog experiment, where you get into bed and there's a switch and you wake up. And a lot of people share with me that that's the experience they have. They're so sleepy, they're downstairs watching TV, all of a sudden they go up to their bed and they're like, ding, they're awake. So we want to be really aware of this and start to make the bed a strong cue for sleeping, right? So that means that we only go to bed when we're sleepy. We get out of bed when we've been awake for longer than 20, 30 minutes. If you feel like you've been lying there and not sleeping, get out of bed, go to a different room. If you're in a dorm, sit in a chair. If you, have a broken leg and can't get out of bed easily, turn around in your bed. I know it sounds so crazy, but instead of sitting up with the pillows behind you, try and move, like be in a different rotation in your bed. All of those things help break that cycle of your brain thinking your bed's for wakefulness. And then you can do something else like read, something that's not too stimulating. Some people have like a crossword puzzle that they just like leave in the living room for when they have these situations. But if you look at the steps for cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, this is number one. Do not stay in bed if you are awake for longer than 20, 30 minutes. Once you've left the bed or moved positions in the bed for 20 to 30 minutes, try again. Go back to the bed, lie back down, see if you can fall asleep again. So use the bed for sleep and intimacy only. Do not watch TV. Take the television, the computer out of the bed. Don't work. Don't use it as an office. The bed. You can set up a desk, but don't use the bed as an office. And really important, and this ties back into that circadian rhythm piece, is that you need to have a consistent bedtime and wake time that aligns with your personal sleep needs and your sleep window. So the more consistent you can be, the more easily it will be to fall asleep at that time, because you are creating and strengthening that circadian clock. And I know it's hard because, the weekends, it's sort of a perfect time to catch up on sleep. You actually cannot catch up on sleep hours. Right? So you don't have a sleep bank that, you put in and you take out, you withdraw, you deposit. It doesn't work like that. So if that helps you, focus on prioritizing consistency, understanding that there is no sleep bank. What your body will do, however, and this helps if you have had a bad night's sleep, going back to that idea that sleep disruptions are normal, is your body will reclaim and generate some of the type of sleep that has been lost. So if you have a bad night and you miss out on some REM sleep, the next night or the night after, your body will generate more of that type of sleep, but it doesn't generate more sleep overall, right? So it will get the sleep back, the type of sleep that you've lost. And you will see that. You actually experience that. If you've had a big night out, someone's wedding, you've been up really late, you'll probably find the next night or the night after that, you'll feel like you had a really deep sleep. And that's because your body is generating the type of sleep it lost out on when you had that late night. And knowing that can be really, really helpful if you're having a bad night, and help sort of squash down the worry and concern about the fact that you're not sleeping. If you know, hey, I'm going to get a good night's sleep in a couple nights, it can be really helpful. Next slide, please. So I spoke a little bit about that shower and bath, but prioritizing a calming wind down routine is really important. Again, I can't highlight this enough, especially as a student. We are, pressed for time. We have always a ton of readings to do, reports to write, research to do. It's near impossible to go, and then get into bed and expect to just fall asleep right away. Our brain actually needs time to process and to sort of come down. So I really emphasize that shift from doing, right? So working, doing self, to just being. And that's why the wind down routine, I always say, harness your inner toddler and really prioritize that. It doesn't have to be long, 20, 30 minutes, dim the lights, stop working, and do something just allows your body and mind to settle and start to shift into that letting go process that needs to happen for sleep. Doesn't have to be a big deal. TV's fine. If you're watching something that's not stimulating, just turning your brain off and letting someone else do some thinking for you, listening to a podcast that's not too stimulating, stretching, a little bit of yoga, listening to some music, having some tea, reading something that's not related to school. Doesn't have to be long. It's just a shift. And the other thing that is really cool about that is, if we go back to thinking about how easily our brain is ritualized, doing the same things in the same order every night in that sort of wind down routine actually sends messages to our brain that it's time to sleep. So if we set up positive sleep associations, it can help with that letting go process as well. Brushing your teeth, washing your face, doing some yoga stretches, reading for a couple minutes, all of that is really, really, really helpful for setting up those positive sleep associations. Next slide, please. Okay, light. This is my favorite one. So as I said earlier, light sets our circadian rhythm. And so we really need to pay attention to light, and not just at nighttime. So not just in regards to darkness, but in regards to what you do first thing in the morning. Because cool tip, when light hits your brain, it actually tells your body when to produce melatonin that night, which will help you get into that sleepy zone. So open the blinds and curtains first thing. With students, and especially with younger, 20, late teens, early adults, those mood lamps or those lights can be really, really helpful, especially if you're in a dark environment, or because here in Northern or in Canada, it can be really dark in the mornings, right? So putting those lights on, I think you can get them at Costco. They're like mood lights. I can't think of the brand name right now. But those can be really effective, light therapy, for getting you into sort of a more realistic time for frame for when your sleep's going to happen. So if you can't get brightness in your house or your working space with just the natural light, then those mood lights or that light therapy can be really effective. Bright work environment. If you're in an office or in a classroom, like make sure all the windows are open, the blinds are open. Spend some time outdoors every day, first thing in the morning, after lunch. And then on the flip side of it, start to dim lights in the evening. Blue light blocking glasses can be helpful if you have to be on a device at night. And then I love the program F-Lux that you can download on your computer or device. And that takes the blue white light out of your devices, because we want to shift into that sort of candlelight environment at that time of day to again send messages to our brain. All right, next slide, please. So move your body. I know I talked about how sleep is more important than exercise, but they kind of work together. So moving your body and exercise actually helps to build our sleep pressure or our drive to sleep. Doesn't need to be a lot. Moderate aerobic exercises, 20 minutes or exercise 20 minutes per day. It can be a walk. It doesn't have to be a spin ride or a marathon or 10K run. It just needs to be moderate, 20 minutes per day. If you find that you're stuck inside because of weather or an injury, even just doing circuits around your house, up and down stairs, anything to get your body moving. There's evidence that shows that the benefits of exercise on sleep, 65% of people had improved sleep when they started exercising. So I can't emphasize this enough. It also generates those feel-good hormones, those endorphins that we need to keep feeling good and positive. Next slide, please. All right, so one of the things that can happen is that we get caught in this loop of caffeine and alcohol because we use those, and you may have remembered those from one of my earlier slides of one of the coping mechanisms that we use when we're feeling sleep deprived or when we feel like we need something to help us fall asleep. So both caffeine and alcohol are diuretics and they cause dehydration. Dehydration, or when we're dehydrated, sends messages to the brain that we are sleepy. So it sends this message, or we feel sleepy when actually we could be dehydrated. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that caffeine actually masks that sleepiness that's produced by the adenosine. So remember earlier I talked about adenosine being the blowing up that balloon. So adenosine, that sleepiness feeling, is masked by caffeine. So even though your timing is 10:30 for bed, if you've had a lot of caffeine in the afternoon, you may not feel sleepy at that time because the sleepiness is blocked by the caffeine. So that's another important feature there. The other thing about the alcohol is that alcohol is, for ages, has been used as a nightcap, right? It can help people fall asleep, and that is true. However, you have to be aware of the impacts that the alcohol has on your physiological body, which it's a diuretic, makes you have to go to the bathroom, so causes those sleep disruptions. Our bodies actually detox as well around 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It starts to detox the alcohol. So depending on how much alcohol you've had, the body will wake up at that time and start to detox, have to go to the bathroom, you'll be dehydrated, you'll need water. So it can be really difficult to go back to sleep, and it interrupts your sleep. So you'll feel tired the next day, which then makes you feel like you need to have caffeine in order to function. So I just emphasize this because it can create a really negative feedback loop that will impact your sleep. So I'm not saying don't do them, but I'm saying be aware. I think the recommendation right now is, last alcoholic beverage like 2 hours before bed, so that you can sort of get it out of your system before you settle into those sleep phases. And then for coffee, 2 to 3 cups before noon. And again, I think that's one that's fairly obvious or put out there a lot by health practitioners. But if you didn't know that's sort of a rule of thumb. in the afternoon, substitute a normal, if you're used to having a caffeinated beverage in the afternoon, try subbing it out with something else. And just see, also recognizing that there is a natural dip after lunch. And that's okay. Your body will start to produce cortisol again and make you feel more alert. There is a natural sort of dip. Next slide, please. And this is the last piece, and I think maybe the most important. It's this belief that we can sleep, right? So it's the belief in your natural ability to sleep, that your body was designed to sleep and it will do what it's supposed to do if we just take a step back and not get involved or not get in our own way. How you think really does impact our behaviors and actions. So if we get caught in this idea or these negative loops of I'm a bad sleeper, I'm not sleeping, I'm a terrible sleeper, I'm not going to be able to function tomorrow, that perpetuates that anxiety and that worry, and it's going to make it really hard to be able to let go and relax into sleep. So if we can start to shift those beliefs using knowledge, primarily that, oh, you know what, my body's going to get back this type of sleep that it lost out on tonight, even if if it takes me a long time to fall asleep, it's okay. My body will regain balance in a couple days. That can be helpful. Even just having positive self-talk. I'm a good sleeper. I've got this. I know that I can function. I may be a little groggy tomorrow, but it's okay. I can still function. So having that positive mindset and that positive self-talk is really, really important for this process. And really learning how to trust that our body, it knows what it's doing, right? So I think that if you can take anything away from today, if you do have a propensity to have sleep issues or start to have those worries and that stress when you're not sleeping, try changing or reframing your thoughts around your sleep, and start to try and trust your body's natural ability. Next slide, please. So hopefully today you've learned why sleep is so important, how it works, and really how you can harness it as a tool for good learning, for taking care of your mental health, for accessing joy. And I think that if you could maybe just take a second right now and think, okay, what's one thing I can start doing right now or today, tonight, to reset my sleep or to optimize, prioritize my sleep. I'd love for you to pop it in the chat or share with me something that you think that you can take away from this. I'd really like that. Next slide, please. And if you feel like you've got some sleep issues that you want to, dive in a bit deeper, if you've got questions, I offer a free clarity call. My website is www.justwhitesleepsolutions.com. I am on Instagram intermittently. I do feel that sometimes social media impacts our sleep, and so I struggle with my showing up on there because I don't want, anyway. But you can find me there. There's on my social media, you can book a free call or book one from my website or just email me. My email is jess@justwhitesleepsolutions.com. Thank you very much for coming today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jess. That was wonderful. I think, I got a lot out of this session, and I saw a lot of the comments coming through as well. I know we've got some questions to get through, which is wonderful. And Emma put in the chat that she's going to make a conscious decision to not look at their phone 30 to 45 minutes before bed. So already people are kind of taking away their own little pieces for their own lifestyle adjustments. So maybe we'll jump right into the questions. I've got quite a few, and this is wonderful. So thank you everyone who's asked a question. So this one is really great. It's such a curious question, and I'd love to know the response too. But someone has asked, what happens if the room is colder than 19 degrees?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's actually better to be cooler because you can load on the blankets as opposed to being too hot and not being able to take anything off, or not, sleeping, the room's too hot and you don't have any duvets to take off anymore because you've taken everything off. So I think it's absolutely fine. And I would probably recommend being on the cooler side of things, and then having layered bed clothes so that you can take them off or put them on as needed.
And be nice and cozy. And now that fall's coming up and you can open your windows, there might be a cool breeze. So it's a little easier in the fall than maybe in the summer for some. But awesome. Thank you for that question. Now, I have another question here. Is reading before bed a good part of a wind down routine?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I would say, and this is a good question, and you may, Emma, be asking it in regards to doing it in bed. I think that if it's not broken, don't fix it. So if reading in bed is part of your bedtime routine and it's not impacting your ability to fall asleep, that's perfectly acceptable. I'm more focused on bedtime activities as being like really wakeful or stimulating, but if reading magazine or fiction or something that is just part of your sleep routine, I think it's a great part of the bedtime routine, and I'm okay with it happening in bed too.
Oh, awesome. And I just, for anyone watching, I got this really great little light that kind of clips on to my bed frame, and it's kind of more of a warm, almost like amber glow. And I don't know, I read like 2 pages and I'm so sleepy. So I don't know if that kind of warmer light that's not super bright helps me kind of wind down.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And just to touch on that a little bit further, Olivia, that is exactly the light that we're looking for at night, is that amber, red. And I always think, or I use, candles, like that's the type of light we're trying to emulate. It's really cozy, it's warm, it's soft. We've moved into this direction of LED lights, and unfortunately, a lot of them are really in that white blue spectrum. And it's really sort of jarring at night. So if you can sort of at night, just even task lighting, take away the overhead lights and use those amber bulbs for nighttime activities, brilliant.
And that kind of leads into another question that came in. Someone was asking, in your presentation, you referred to a lamp, and they were curious if you've ever heard of a sad lamp.
Yes, that's exactly it. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. Yeah. And actually, on that note, now is actually the time that you should start using them. So a lot of times those sad lamps will be recommended in sort of November, December. Right. But the earlier you can start using them, the better. Okay. Because it sort of builds up those hormones and like all the things that I don't know all the medical aspects of it, but it's better to start earlier than later.
Absolutely. Awesome. And then I had another question come into the chat. And this one I'm really curious about too. So I'm really glad that someone asked this. But the question is, I would like to hear what Jessica has to say about using smartwatches to monitor sleep trends. I've been monitoring my sleep trend for the past 6 months, and sometimes I wonder if maybe it's doing more harm than it is good.
I'm so glad that was brought up. And I have a love-hate with the technology, because I think it can be really informative. And if it's not causing you to be hyper-focused or obsessed, and you're just sort of using it as generative information, and you're just okay with whatever comes up, then it's fine. Where it starts to be more harmful than good is if people start to obsess about it. Like, oh my gosh, I only had 4.5 hours of restful sleep last night. And if it starts to feed into that anxiety and that worry, that's when I suggest taking it out of the equation and going back to just that internal reliance and intuition about how you're feeling when you're waking up in the morning as being a better indicator.
Absolutely. I'm glad that this person asked that, and I'm glad that's your response, because I pride myself on being a great sleeper. And I also got like a Fitbit, and I started monitoring my sleep, and I had to stop wearing it at night because it was stressing me out. Every morning, it was like the first thing I looked at, which I don't think is healthy either.
No.
Yeah. All right. And then I'll go to another question that came into the chat while we were talking about the sleep bank. So the question is, if there is no sleep bank, what happens if you usually work an early morning job, and then your boss maybe wants you to help that same day or do an overnight, is there still no sleep bank? Or what does your body do to sleep during the day?
Okay, so sorry, is the question if a person is doing shift work and needs to sleep during the day, or is it if they lose out on the sleep being overnight?
Maybe we could address a little bit of both.
Okay.
It seems to be
Yes.
kind of crammed into one.
So for shift working is challenging, and I have to say that it's not good for us. It's really not good for us, and I know that there's work that needs to be done, that very important work that needs to be done overnight. But it's very hard to come back from, and it does impact our circadian clock. So on that note, if you have, like, one of my very close friends is an ER nurse, and she has to sleep during the day. So my recommendation around that is the lighting, the light therapy can be really helpful with that. Setting up that circumstance and that situation where you protect your sleep environment is absolutely critical. So if you are at home and there's kids and stuff, you need to have a white noise. You need to have some soundproofing or earplugs, darkness, nightshade, like the whole 9 yards, in order to send messages to the brain that this is the time for sleeping. And then when you wake up from that, if you are going to be on a night shift, for example, for a couple weeks, then the recommendation is that you treat it the same way as if you woke up in the morning, there would be light. So what you would do is when you woke up from your night shift, you would access that light to teach your brain that you were going to actually be sleeping on a different schedule. So it's a bit finicky and tricky, but it can be done. It does take some effort. And I know I said earlier, like, if you're exerting any effort, then that's a red flag. But in this case, when you're shift working, you need to exert the effort. And then to answer the second part of that question, it sort of is in line with what I was saying earlier. If you do have to work an overnight every so often, your body will reclaim that type of sleep that it lost by working that overnight shift. So you will get more of each type of sleep over the next couple days that you lost out on. So the sleep bank is about numbers. It's not generating more hours. Right. It's all about the type of sleep.
Sure. And I actually have David requested to ask a question verbally. I think David was the one who originally asked the question. So David, I'm going to go ahead and say allowed to talk. So you'll just have to unmute yourself. Oops, sorry, I just muted you. That was my fault. There we go. So go ahead. And if you want to clarify, feel free.
Yeah, so actually I work at McDonald's.
Okay.
So the thing is I work 5 to 1 Monday to Friday, but I find usually that my boss is like, hey, we don't have enough overnight people, because during pandemic now, either people don't want to work or they don't want to do much at all. So we find ourselves being short-staffed on the overnights. So when my boss asks me on, like, let's say a Friday during the day while I'm there, he's like, hey, we got nobody, do you mind coming in? So there I am, getting maybe an hour or two of a nap, and then I'm coming in for 10 o'clock and then working until 6 in the morning on Saturday morning.
Right.
So I kind of get your answer, but it's like once in a while. So that doesn't matter. There is no such thing as a sleep bank, though.
No, I mean, I know what you're saying, and it's hard to quantify that, right? So in that regard, I mean, obviously, when you get home at 6 a.m., you're going to go to sleep, and then you just try and write your schedule again as best as possible. So it'd be like you were going to do if you were traveling, into a different time zone. So if you had that particular situation, I wouldn't recommend saying, okay, now stay awake the whole day and go to sleep. I mean, if you could, that would actually be the best, because you're going to regulate your system faster if you get onto the time zone immediately. But if you've worked an entire night and you're exhausted, then yeah, I would say have a nap in that circumstance and then try and go to bed at a reasonable time. So that the idea is, like shift work is ultimately like traveling, right? Like you're in different time zones. So the recommendation for time zones is to get yourself on the new time zone as quickly as possible. So if that requires having a 20-30 minute nap, go for it. If it requires having a 2-hour nap, that's okay. The longer you nap, it's going to be harder to bounce back from those. So you want to be aware of that. And then maybe in your circumstance, if you came home, had a nap, woke up at say 9, and then went to bed at 9 that night, you might be able to get back on track. It's more about getting back on track into your consistent cycle, set schedule.
Okay. So it's more like if you're up for 36 hours, if you can get 4 hours in there, it's better and faster to get onto a normal schedule.
Yeah, it's about getting back onto your normal schedule, but it is difficult if that's going to be your weekly schedule, right?
Okay.
So yeah.
Which it's not.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's good.
Thanks, David. Perfect. Okay, and then we have another question here, and now I'm curious about this one too. You folks have such wonderful questions. What about decaffeinated coffee in the afternoon or in the evening?
Yeah, I think that decaf's fine. I mean, there is like caffeine in decaf. But again, it's one of those things. If it's not broken, don't worry about it. If you don't find it's impacting you and decaf's not impacting you, then go for it.
Awesome. Wonderful. And then we definitely have time. We're good. We have 2 questions left in the Q&A, which is wonderful. So this question I love. Thank you to the person who asked this. Does Jessica recommend any books on sleep, learning more? Like, do you have any resources, Jessica? I know we've posted your website, but anything you'd want to recommend?
Well, I do have a great blog on what I talked about today on my website, talking about the natural sleep system. So I highly recommend going and reading that. I'm a big fan of Matthew Walker, if no one's heard of him. He's a neuroscience based out of California. And he wrote the book, I think it's called Why We Sleep. And he's just started a podcast. Wow. And he's only got 3 episodes out so far, but he's a really great resource. And he's got tons of interviews that you can access online. If you are wanting to if you do feel like you have insomnia and you want to delve in further into the cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, there's some apps that you can use that starts to regulate your timing and keep you focused on those strategies that I discussed. So for example, getting out of bed when you're not sleeping, getting up at the same time every day, really restricting the amount of time that you're in bed. So there's some great apps there. I'm just going to look up the one that I like the best. It's called CBTI Coach.
CBT, I can look it up for sure.
Okay. And then Colleen Carney is based out of Ryerson University in Toronto, and she is an incredible resource. She's written a bunch of books. She's done, years of research on this, and she's really fabulous. So that would be, and I can type that up too, or Olivia, if you want me to put that in the.
Absolutely. I found the Why We Sleep book, and I popped that in the chat.
Okay, good.
Great reviews on Goodreads. So very
exciting.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then we have one last question that I'd love to get to, and we're running a little short on time, so we'll get through that, and then we'll do our little outro. But Mark has asked that Mark enjoys a light snack before going to bed, but is wondering when they should stop eating. If there's
that's a great question. And I actually wanted to talk about nutrition in my talk today, but I find that it's like its own topic in and of itself as it relates to sleep, but it's really important. Bedtime snacks are really great, especially if you find that you have low blood sugar, because low blood sugar can actually cause arousal and wake ups in the night. So this is for people, especially if you're sort of calorie counting or on a specific diet. Snacks that are high in protein and complex carbs before bed are really great at balancing your blood sugar. Timing wise, I guess, I don't know. I mean, I know that some people say 8 p.m. It depends on, I don't think that there's a wrong answer there. I would just say, maybe an hour before you go to sleep. I don't know that there's any hard and fast science behind timing of eating, unless you're on like the fasting and all those other types of diets. But yeah.
I usually eat when I'm hungry. So Mark, if it's it's not causing you any problems or stomach troubles at night and you're eating those healthy foods, I think that's, yeah, according to Jessica, it's great.
But there are some foods that are really that impact sleep. So that, and just to be quick about those, it's just like, there are foods that we don't know have caffeine in them, so they can be sneaky, like ice cream. And then popcorn, anything that can cause like stomach gas, like any cruciferous vegetables, and popcorn, which is kind of too bad because it's often a snack that we eat at night when we're watching movies. It can cause digestion issues, and that can impact your sleep.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Jessica, Caprice, we can spotlight Caprice. I just wanted to take a moment while you're on here, just to introduce everyone to Caprice. And just, she's our new, I'll pin her here. Caprice is our new health promotions coordinator. Did you want to say a couple words? We're running a little short on time, so we'll keep it brief.
Oh, yes. So I just want to say a quick hello. I am the new health promotion and education coordinator at Health Services. So you'll see me around holding events related to any health topic. And if you have any questions, feel free to pop by and ask some questions or send me an email.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So we'll have Jessica back here, and we'll put myself. And I just wanted to say a really quick thank you to everyone who joined us today. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time with us and for learning a little bit more about how you can be healthy and how you can really kind of harness your sleep superpower. A huge thank you to Jessica. This was so informative and so well put together. I'm so grateful that you had the time to spend with us today. So thank you so much, Jessica. And now for everyone else, thanks. For everyone else, that's all the time that we've got left for today. So again, thank you so much. We still have a couple of really fun events left in our Let's Get Social Week. So you can definitely check out the Let's Get Social Week page. And don't forget to connect with Jessica on either Instagram or check out her website. I know there's lots of great resources there. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.